We're going to be going over our personal career paths after introductions or during introductions, and then afterwards we're going to go over kind of like the frequently missed paths that are inside different venues of the industry that we've had experience with, or just maybe that a lot of people don't know about. And then we're gonna have it open to like Q&A as to like if you're in a position where you're not really sure where you want to go or how to get where you want to go. We're gonna have all that stuff covered, and that's pretty much the game plan. So if y'all are ready, my name is Marc Straight. I'm an audio director on for a couple games. Undead Darlings is the big one that's going to be coming out this year, as well as Quest, Augmented Reality, Fate and the Cursed, and I've also done vocal editing on Divinity Original Sin 2, and I released a lot of music. Yeah.
Understatement.
Yeah. Hey everyone, I am Novil, aka Pyrogeist. I am a local DJ that heavily favors video game and video game inspired music. So yeah, that's it. Yeah, I'm the local DJ that they wanted to talk about DJing. So
That's really good.
Yeah.
I'm Isabella Ness. I am based in the DC area. I'm a sound designer and mixer and programmer. I've worked on lots of different types of media, but primarily video games. Started in mobile games, made kind of different strides with other things, and recently released Marvel Powers United VR, and was lead audio design for the Year of the Dragon in Spyro Reignited. So that's kind of the new one. That's the baby that's kind of getting its wings, and we're still really excited about it. But yeah, it's been a fun ride.
My name is Josie Brechner. My pronouns are she, her, or they, them. I am an audio designer for games, and I guess for me that means I do a lot of composition, but also sound design and implementation and that stuff. I worked on Blossom Tales, which was one of the early Switch titles. I've been working on a lot of smaller indies this year, including a game called Extreme Meat Punks Forever, which is about using mech suits made out of meat to punch Nazis off of cliffs.
Hell yeah.
It was extremely good and satisfying. And yeah, I have a background in both doing indie electronic music and like touring and doing shows on that side of things. And also like experimental theater is a realm that I was like working in for a while. So I've been a little all over the place and can definitely talk about not knowing what the fuck you want to do, because I did not know for a very long time.
Cool. So with my career path, it was mainly, I started in horror. I worked in haunted attractions. So like if you went to Six Flags during their Halloween event, you probably heard my music. Also Disney has some of my music. So like those sorts of things are how I started, because I started as a horror actor, and I was like, this is dope. I'm really good at scaring people, and I can make really freakish sounds. So let's get paid to make those things. So I started doing that, and eventually I've always liked video games, but like I like being employed for more than half of a year, because like if you work in horror, it's like March until September you're working.
It's the spook zone.
Yeah. So I was like, well, video games, I already care about them, so I want to make horror games. And I still have only worked on one horror game, and only the playable teaser has come out for it. Playable teaser on PlayStation 4.
And then it was fucking canceled.
I don't know what you're talking about. Anyway, so I've only worked on one horror game, but in the meantime, I've worked on a lot of different titles. And I have most of my experience now is in composition, with my secondary being sound design, and all of that is like Magic based. And then the newest one that I've been doing a whole lot of is dialogue editing. If you want to get into this industry and you want to immediately just like have work consistently, get good at dialogue editing. There is always a shortage of people that will tolerate how much bullshit comes with dialogue editing, and it will make sure that you're good at making things clean.
Yeah, actually, to piggyback off that, so Jason Cantor, so I'm based out in Brooklyn, and Jason Cantor, who works at Avalanche and runs the audio team at Avalanche Studios, worked for, I think, 4+ years specifically doing only the dialogue editing for the Simlish in the Sims franchise.
Yeah.
So listening to made-up Sims language day in, day out for years was his entry to getting into games and game audio.
Yeah, like that. I do it like for 4 months out of the year, and you telling me 4 years, like, I don't know if it's the whiskey I just drank or like what, but I feel sick from that. But if you are willing to deal with that, like, that's a really good way to meet devs and start working in the industry. And then if you're already like good at making things clean, that's like 60% of sound design is making sure that your sounds don't sound fucked up. And then the rest of it is like putting your own personal taste and matching imagery. And that's like, that would be my advice for getting your foot in the door with any career path except for programming. If you're in audio programming, just say you're a programmer that likes sound, and you will have more work than you know what to do with. You can talk more about that though.
Yeah.
But that's my entire thing to start out with. If as far as music goes, I couldn't get work as a composer, just straight up, no matter how much experience I had, because there's 10 million people want to get in for music because it's a lot of musicians, not a lot of work, because you only need one composer usually per title. So I was like, fuck it, I'm gonna make my own game. So I learned how to make games kind of in Unity, and I started experimenting, and my experimentation just led me into just making music for myself. And then I released an album called Souls and Blood, which was an orchestra album that was inspired by Dark Souls and Bloodborne. And that is like the entire reason why I'm getting work now, and that was 2 years ago. So it took me from just being another person trying to get work, but only getting things I wasn't interested in, to where now I'm doing a lot more, and primarily doing composition and direction, which is where I'm happiest. But yeah.
For those people who just came in, this is Marc, Novil, Isabella. My name is Josie, and we're talking about like sort of our different journeys into the world of audio and working in different kinds of audio, and how we got to where we are today, I guess.
So for me, things started about 5 years ago. Actually, my inspiration for getting into it actually comes from MAGFest, basically. I saw DJ Cutman. I thought he was awesome. I love the whole Game Chops crew. And probably about a year after that, my friend Cody, actually right over here, also DJs, and I had asked him to DJ my 21st birthday party, and he did. He came through, and I had a couple drinks, got the liquid courage up, and I was like, I really just want to try it. And he was like, here, just go for it. So he taught me some basics, and I hopped on there, and I turned the party out. It was great. So yeah, thanks. Yeah. So after that, I was like, this is awesome. I really want to keep doing this. So I saved up money over like a year, and I just bought the whole setup at once. Got my amps, my controller, just the whole shebang, good to go. Started DJing, mostly like at my own place, honestly, in the beginning. Just having little porcellas, just at my own place. But then I moved on to starting doing house parties at friends' places. Then I started moving on to getting, paid to do some of these parties, which is always awesome. I actually did Cody's wedding, so that was awesome. That was probably it was a really special moment for me.
Yeah.
I mean for them
yes.
too. For them
yes.
too, I'm sure it was special for them, but it was really special for me. And then I've actually got another friend of mine whose wedding I'm doing this year with him. So we're definitely looking forward to that. But I've been doing this for about, I guess I'm 26, so about 5 years now. I had a bit of a hiatus, had some personal stuff going on over the last 2 years, but that stuff's out of the way. I'm back off of hiatus. I have Marc to thank partially for that, because he was like, hey, I'm doing a panel, and I'm going to need you to come up there and talk about DJing so you can start DJing some more. And I was like, yeah, well, that would do it. That would do it. So that's where I'm at now. As far as getting into it, if you can find somewhere to do it for free first, friend, if you don't have any friends, Just get
friends
get some friends. Get some friends. Barring that, there's a lot of cheap or free software to at least give it a go to see if you like it before you sink all that money into it. Because if I hadn't had him to try it out first, I probably never would have started.
What are those software for people that don't know?
There's like mobile stuff. I'm not too familiar with it, but I know it's out there.
Okay.
You could also get, I think actually the DJ software I use is free. It's just the decks are not. I use Serato.
Right.
I use Rekordbox. And that Rekordbox is real weird. Like, talk to me about Serato, because everyone talks about that.
Yeah.
And I've looked at it, and it's like Greek to me.
Really?
Yeah.
Because if I look at Rekordbox, I'm like, what is this?
You see, like a Rekordbox, like everything is so straightforward, it's unfuckable for me, because I'm dumb. And like, if I have to if I have to look at a tutorial, I ain't doing shit. Like, it's like for real. Like, if you tell me look at a manual, I'll be like, okay, I wanna fuck with this for 3 hours for something I could look up in 3 minutes. Like, it just, I'm done.
So that's funny, because that's how I feel about Serato. Like, I didn't look at the manual. I clicked the little help question mark and just hovered over stuff. I was like, okay, this does that does that. Okay, all right, let's get it. Like,
yeah.
How you gonna hit the help button?
I cheated.
Wow, so proud, so stubborn.
Good night, everybody.
Have fun with all your wasted time.
So yeah, it's just figure out a way, if it's possible, to give it a go first, without sinking a bunch of money into it. Or, I mean, if you have the disposable income, go for it. But it's really not that difficult, in my opinion, as long as you keep at it. You just got to keep going for it. So you'll teach yourself new things. I was practicing before I came to MAGFest, and I figured out some other cool stuff I could do. So, it's.
So like with you doing with you like starting out, for people that want to start out doing this, like, wouldn't MAGFest be good because they have like the jam
Excellent.
with
Yeah,
the boards?
it's fantastic. Yeah,
Like,
they already have a table there for you. You got to bring your own boards, but yeah.
Well, some people will share boards too. Also,
They'll share boards. They'll share PAs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, Guitar Center, fuck up people's day. Like, there's like 9 dudes playing like Led Zeppelin badly on guitars. If you want to have, anyway, there's like 9 people playing all the same shit on guitars. Like, have a rave by yourself in the room, like, while you're trying to learn. Who gives a fuck? Like, go for it.
Yeah,
Oh,
the
anyway.
guitar is definitely a good resource, but yeah. So yeah, that's, I guess, where we're at now. So.
Cool. I started as a composer, actually. I went to university. I got my bachelor's in composition. And I had every intention of going into composing and becoming a game composer. Just because I did a bunch of projects in college with my friends, and I scored their games, and I would sort of do short films and things like that, and I was so dead set on it. But the more that I explored digital synthesis and sort of everything that comes with it, I was required to take a digital synthesis course as part of my diploma, and fell into Pure Data and Super Collider out of that. And I was like, wait a second, this is way more fun than what I'm doing. So I just really dove into that, and I used it first to write music and performance pieces, and sort of what Josie was saying. I think that's like a pretty common thing that happens with audio people, is that we get into sort of experimental performance sound. And out of that space, I was like, well, I still really like working in games, because that's I loved the idea of an interactive media, and I play a lot, so it was something that I felt very familiar with, and it was something that just I loved doing so much. And so I was like, well, okay, I have to reevaluate. I clearly, I don't really feel myself resonating so much with composing anymore. So I started taking a bunch of courses in sound, and I was like, okay, yeah, this is much better. And because of that, my university wasn't in a place that they had game-centric stuff. So then it was sort of like this list of like, all right, I was a junior in college, and I was like, well, I want to get a job. I don't want to go to graduate school. What do I need to do right now to prepare myself for what's coming up? So I taught myself how to operate Wise. I taught myself Fmod, which are 2, if you're not familiar with those programs, it's called middleware. And it's basically sort of a pipeline between your sounds and the game engine. And the game engine communicates with the middleware to kind of know how to cue what sounds and how to make them behave. So I knew that I wanted to have that as a viable thing. I taught myself how to work in Engine. So it was just a lot of sort of late nights and frustrated evenings, like sitting in front of my computer, just screwing up for hours and hours and hours and hours until I got one thing to work. And that's like the best feeling ever, when you just like get one ping to play back and you're like, yeah! After like 6 hours, and it's nothing at all, but it just feels like this great sort of like, I can get a job now. And that's not quite it, but you're halfway there. But then from there, after I graduated, I was like, all right, now I really got to double down. I got to network, because it's like, honestly, like, long story short, network, meet people. This industry is probably one of the most people-focused industries I've ever been a part of and ever will be and have ever heard of. It's all about how you are to work with. Spoiler alert, don't be a jerk. Who in terms of like who's gonna be able to vouch for you when push comes to shove. Like a job comes through the door, oh, I know this person, they're great, hire them. Like that's the thing. But through learning those softwares and kind of learning what needed to happen, and through the job search and kind of looking at what they were asking for, programming is really important. So on top of all of that, learning a little bit of C# goes a really long way. And I got an internship, happened to fall out of the sky. It was total dumb luck. Internship turned into contracting, turned into the job I have now. So that was sort of the way the cookie crumbled for me. Nobody gets into this industry the same way. The only thing that, like, I think the most important takeaway from all four of us up here is the skills that we equipped ourselves with to do what we did. There's no step-by-step thing of like, do this, and job. Like, we're not a business school, thank God. But like, it's a toolbox that you have to know what to do with. And my toolbox that I ended up giving myself was design, client-facing, producing, and programming. So it's sort of it's a kit that you take with and do what you will with it. And it ends up being really satisfying if you know how to land that.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
Whenever you were learning FMOD, did you press the help button?
No, I pressed the YouTube button.
Okay, I can plug from that.
Yeah, like that's the secret too to learning anything. If you have a question about it, someone else somewhere on the internet has had the same question, and like worse. Like if you're like, I can't get this menu to open, someone else on Google is like, I can't get the menu to open and my computer's on fire. Like it's just like it's so they solved it and they're fine. They fixed it.
Yeah.
So like forums are great, YouTube is great. If it's a product like Reaper, please get Reaper. It's the best DAW. Like the forums are incredible because it's completely open source. Everyone is like vouching for each other. Everyone's writing scripts.
Wait,
like,
sorry,
hey,
Isabel, what is a DAW for people who might not know?
a digital audio workstation. So I have a lot of feelings about Pro Tools. I don't like Pro Tools. I don't like Avid. I think Avid is I'm sorry if anyone here works for Avid. No, it's bad. It's bad. But Reaper, it's an industry standard. You should know how to use it, but don't marry yourself to it. Reaper is great. But it's the forums, YouTube, any sort of like old Gear Sluts forum from like 2004, someone has run into the problem before. So it's like learning something yourself without a teacher or without, like, don't pay for a class unless you really love the teacher that's teaching the class. Don't sink the money into it. If you have the time and the drive to learn something, you're gonna do just fine on your own because the internet exists. We have it. It's great. It's right there. It's in your phone. So yeah, it's great.
Cool.
Tell us about yourself, Josie.
Okay. I mean, I feel like a lot of the stuff you talked about, Isabella, is like really stuff that I think about a lot.
Kindred spirits.
What's that?
Kindred spirits.
Yeah. Like in terms of like having goals in mind of what you might want to do, but also like maintaining openness and flexibility in either A, how you approach and achieve those goals, and being flexible that like the things you think you may want to do might also be related to and lead you down into an area of a new thing that you actually end up wanting to doing.
If you had told me 3 years ago that I would be a programmer, that I would be like calling myself a programmer, I would have asked you why and how, and like that wasn't something that was even on my mind 4 or 5 years ago, like that. And now it's most of what it's like 60% of what I do, and it's really fun, and it is a really, really, really good spot to get yourself in, because as it stands, there aren't that many of us that are like actually calling ourselves audio programmers.
Technical sound designer, even now is like going more into audio programming.
Yeah, and that's I still wouldn't call myself a technical audio person, because there's still a lot more that goes into that. You have to build your system, and I don't have as much experience with full on starting from scratch. But yeah, anything that you can do to get your technical chops up, holy crap, you're gonna be just fine.
Yeah, but continue on, Josie.
Yeah.
I grew up playing like drums and saxophone, and I came up in like a very like rock band like background, like playing with high school friends and like doing random stuff like that when I was in college. And I went to college, my undergrad was like marketing and political science. And like as I was graduating, I was like starting to like finish using GarageBand and like start using Logic, and like just was experimenting a lot and falling into a habit of like making more stuff, and I don't know, my brain like liked it. And so instead of like going into the paths that I had thought I was going to, I ended up sort of taking a hard left turn and being like, well, what if I did music? And so I moved to New York and like started working a day job and was trying to figure out for me like what working in music could sound like. And I guess in a big way, I knew that I didn't want to have a traditional job. Like I had tried interning in like marketing stuff, and it just really didn't jive for me. I didn't like having to like wear a uniform at the office, and like I didn't like having to do like PowerPoint every day, and I had to plan an office party. We had like the literal big inflatable sumo people, and I was like, this is a literal like sitcom hell. Please,
Get me out of this.
No. So my goal for myself was if I was stubborn enough, I could just find a way to make things work, hopefully. I mean, and then it doesn't always work out. Like I really am lucky in some ways, and I'm still working to get there in a lot of ways as well. But so I was like making music and trying to see if I could just have a successful career in like making indie music. And it turns out you can't just put something up on Bandcamp and then just, it doesn't go viral. That only happens to like a 0.001% of people who make music, right? Like, many of the successful creators you see have been working at it for years, and there's decades, 2 decades of work behind that. So I think sometimes it's really easy to underrepresent how much work goes into what we think of as success. And then after a while, like I just really wasn't like feeling it. I didn't like performing live. I didn't like making music in Logic and like making headphone music and like translating that into a live experience. And at the same time, people were telling me that like my music sounded pretty video gamey, and I love video games. And so I was like, well, what if I made some stuff that was definitively video gamey? And so I made these 2 albums that were called Songs from an Unmade World, and I put them up on Free Music Archive, which is like a really awesome resource. And that's actually how I got my first gig, is like some folks were like looking for stuff there and using it as placeholder music in this game Blossom Tales. And then they like reached out to me.
I had no idea about that.
Yeah, it was really weird and very lucky and very serendipitous, and it could have not happened, and then maybe I wouldn't be here, and I don't know. So I think just being open to trying out new things and like different pathways you could go down, and being open to the opportunities that could fall into your lap, and being able to say yes at those points is like almost as important as anything else.
So with that in mind, like, first of all, about like career paths, how no one starts where they end up. Like, I was going to go to medical school for genetic engineering.
Dr. Marc.
Yeah. That was where I was going to. I decided to skip that and go to Hollywood, to go to Musicians Institute in Hollywood. So like that really impressed my parents. So like no one really like has a set path in mind whenever you're starting out. But piggybacking off of what like how everything starts out, I mean like, whenever you're starting, like the biggest thing is to always be prepared for when someone approaches you with a gig. So like whatever you think will be the thing that you can tolerate the most doing in bulk for a while, that's what you should specialize at. I mean, like there's opportunity in music. Like if you get hired to be a sound designer on an indie game, there's a solid chance you might also be the composer. Like if you have the right tools for the job for one, and you want to interchange for the other, just be really good at least one thing. So when someone approaches you and says, hey, I like what you're doing, you can say, I'm ready to do it. I'm ready to do it for you. And that's what the biggest point is. And the other thing is visibility. I've gotten all my gigs from last year that I got were all focused off of like me showing my workflow and how I do things on social media. Like
Twitter.
Yeah. Twitter.
Like, get a Twitter if you don't have one.
Yeah.
Holy crap. I know everyone on here because of Twitter.
Yeah. And like my friend Alex Barnhart, he got an incredible job working at Hexany Audio, and it happened directly after he posted a viral like video on Twitter of him dropping ice onto the ground and making it into a spell.
Like a spell sound effect.
Yeah, spell sound effect. He did his entire flow plan, and like shortly thereafter, he got a job, like a great job doing sound design. I don't know if those two are tied, but I'm going to assume that those are tied together. But like the visibility thing is really important. And so making sure that people know what you're doing is the easiest way. Like it's always relationships are important. Like friendships are important because people don't want to hire a bad person or someone that doesn't jive with the team. But also, if they don't know who you are, how are they going to hire you?
I also think, like, in addition, so like I think some of like the things that we've agreed on and drawn out, and Novil, I want to hear more from you too about like your experience and like what your goals are and stuff. But like is like being a like nice and like open person that people could see themselves working with, like sort of thinking about like maybe other areas like you could dip into. I think also a big thing for me that I try to do is like have genuine interest in areas outside of audio, and like I did a lot of visual art growing up, and that's something I still am very into. And so I feel like when I can talk to artists who are working on games or like developers who are also making the art for the games about like their art in like a way that's a little more detailed, a little more nuanced, that helps them see me in a new light. And especially in the kinds of things that I'm working on, which are small teams of like 2 to 10 people, like everyone kind of lends a hand in everything else. And so it's a real asset if you feel like you have capable skills out like in like visual art or in writing or in programming or in UI. Like this is all stuff that's like super relevant.
And also just be a person, talk about just more things you just talked
Right.
about. Half of my tweets are like talking about hot sauce.
And also a hobby, like keep yourself sane. There's and try to get something very far away from sound. Like I know every person who works in sound is also quite musical. So like lots of people play an instrument, lots of people practice some sort of music. And that's really important because that keeps that very creative side of your brain open. But also, like, it's a challenge, too, if you're working really hard and you don't really have the time or the money, because sometimes there's a money barrier to things, too. But, like, as simple as, like, you know, you go for a walk every day. Like, something that gets you away from the gig for a little bit, that's going to do leaps and bounds to save you from yourself when stuff gets really hard. Like, there were 2 points last year of crunch that were just, like, you know, it was sort of a combination of management, just pure workload. My own stress on myself is just like, if you don't give yourself the opportunity to completely shut your mind off from audio, you're going to end up hating your job. And you're going to end up trying to make a leap from the career at some point that might have been avoided if you had done the hard work to pull yourself out of it for like 20 minutes at a time. Have you found that with DJing too? Because I think it's a very unique thing with like studio work that we do. That like I feel like if you're in an environment with so many people and like that's so exciting, like that's completely different.
Yeah, I think you were saying you're not really into the live stuff, but I totally feed off of that.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
I have more fun doing that than like anything else.
And like that's sorry. No, you talk.
No. But backtracking a bit to what you were saying about dipping your fingers into something adjacent. Thank you. Adjacent to what your passion is, as far as like with DJing. I was like, okay, this is a lot of fun. What else can I do to kind of spice things up? And Mark actually was also singing the praises about Reaper. So I've been looking into that. I'm still garbage at it, but you know, it's fun. It's fun to mess around in and try and get things working. I'll probably be asking you about it after the panel. But it definitely helps keep things interesting for, you know, what I'm doing primarily, which is DJing. You know, what's cooler than, you know, mixing together a bunch of cool songs for a big group of people? Well, how about I mix some of my own songs in there? You know, like how cool is that? But yeah, that's as far as like
Sorry, I lost my train of thought. A little bit too much whiskey.
Well, just to
Yeah.
talk about other things, I feel like there's a ton of soundtrack work that's coming up that's
Yeah.
really heavily leaning on DJing, Floor Kids, that game that came
Oh,
out on the
yeah.
Switch, or the recent Spider-Man movie, takes orchestral
best
scores
movie
and
ever.
scratches it
Still
after
need
the
to
fact.
see it. I still need
It's
to see it.
so good.
It's so good.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, it's so good.
So we hit the halfway point. So what I think we should do, let's talk about our personal goals for what we're going to be aiming for.
Okay.
And then we'll go to open QA for anyone that has career path stuff that they want to discuss, and we can kind of give our interpretations of what would be good.
Yeah.
Since I started the instructions, you should start.
Wait, so what's the question again?
Your career goals for
My 2019 goals?
not just what you see yourself.
What are my hopes and dreams for 2019? Is that it?
Just in general, not 2019.
Beyond fear.
So despite having a pretty self-taught background, I just started grad school this past September.
Hell yeah. That's
What up, grad school? So I'm in a period where I'm still working on projects, but also focusing on school, and that's enough.
Yeah.
After that finishes, I would really, really, really love to work at a small indie studio that's 10-ish folks, 10 to either a small studio that makes only its own games, or there are a couple audio studios that are focused on being hired as a studio to make audio and sound and music for other games. So I feel like I'm really good in small teams. I feel like, yes.
So is there something that you're going to focus on and trying to move toward that? Is there a certain do you have a way do you have a thought process on how you're going to be going toward that goal?
Well, so I was lucky. I did this thing called the audio mentoring program. This last winter spring. It's a nonprofit org that helps pair up established folks in the audio field with folks who are kind of figuring out what they're doing, like me. And so I got to work with Gord Bellamy, who's at Shell in the Pit. And he's really great. So Shell in the Pit is one of the audio studios that worked on Night in the Woods. And so we had video calls and he talked. So he's someone who I reach out to and be hey, as I'm getting ready to graduate, I would love to work with you. Is that something you can see happening in the next year, 2 years? How could my skills dovetail in? Because he has a good idea of what I'm up to.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I feel I yell a lot on Twitter, and
That's a good way to do things. Seriously.
yeah, I feel that's helped me gain access to other
Yeah.
parts of the industries outside of North America too. And so
Absolutely.
I don't know. I really would move anywhere anyone would hire me. So
That's great.
I think I'll just my plan I guess is if I yell loud enough on Twitter, someone will be yeah, you should come work with us. And I'd be I'm so sorry for you. What about you, Isabella?
Sweet. I want to get better at programming. It's something that I've done a lot of, and I've taken a lot of production roles with my last few projects in terms of scheduling and client facing and sort of deciding how assets need to move within the dev cycle, and just getting a better handle on that is great because I think one of the things that you risk losing when you really dive full on into audio, because it's such a solitary thing, is that if you like working with people, you have to actively look for ways to work with people. You have to make sure that you're being very upfront with production. If you're not a producer, being clear with other members of production or other people on your team to be hey, I want to contribute. If you're having a meeting, I want to be there. Because usually that we're not always we're rarely the first department that gets thought of to be who should we include? Maybe not audio, because we're all the way at the end of the pipeline. It's programming, art, polish, audio. So sometimes we don't even get a polish pass. But better at programming, just more production behind me. I would love to get to the point where I can sort of just be my own agent and kind of not agent you should talk to my agent, but a free agent, sort of I am my packet of skills, and I can sort of hawk that as it needs to be applied to projects, because that's a really freeing concept that I don't think I've let myself think very much about a lot. because you tend to get tied to one spot when you're working in a studio atmosphere. So kind of just figuring out how that's going to work and go from there. But that'd be great, because I really like to move around and be in lots of different places and see cool stuff. So
Speaking of programming, like one of my goals and something I started last year, but is going to be more of a thing for me this year, is like working on like learning Unity and like learning Unreal, and like these are the engines that like a lot of devs are making games on, and so like by being able to be fluent in those things myself, I think it'll make working on future projects like a lot smoother.
Yeah, and one other thing is that like if you can't find a studio that's doing something that you're excited about, or like if you keep working with people that consistently aren't inspiring you, like there's nothing wrong with doing that to pay the bills, but if you really feel like you need to be inspired, take the bull by the horns and like teach yourself something. There's Twine, there's Unity, there's all sorts of what was the one you just told me?
Bitsy's really good.
Yeah, like all these different programs and languages and engines that are super accessible. Like there's a curve, of course, but once you kind of crest that first like whoop, like then like you can start just doing everything yourself, which is kind of the most freeing thing ever.
Real quick before you start, Isabella also has experience as an audio producer, which is a very, very focused role and very underrepresented or less known about. So if you are interested in production to any degree,
ask me about index cards.
Yeah, so if you are interested in that side of organizational detail, like pipeline thing, make sure to talk about that with her. I just wanted to, because we didn't touch on that at all, I wanted to make sure to give that a shout out.
Yeah, no problem. So for me, it's definitely to continue honing my craft with DJing. And as I mentioned earlier, I really, really want to get into producing because it's, like I said, I feel like it's the next step for me personally. This is kind of a funny anecdote, but I kind of have like a pretty good idea of how well it'll go. We got some luck in the family. My cousin he produced the beat for Bodak Yellow.
Yo.
Yeah, so
What?
So I'm like, oh, and he's been the one that's been pushing me to produce for years and years and years. He's like, you should produce. I'm like, yeah, I'll get around to it. And then this happened. He's like, I'm doing pretty well. You should produce.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And I was like, yeah, you know what? That would be really awesome. I won't say I doubt, but it would be a pleasant surprise if I ever hit that level. But yeah, that would be awesome. Definitely producing. More steady gigs, because I'll get my gigs and it's a nice payout, but they're not as frequent as I would like. So at least around here, I feel like it's hard to get into the bar scene because not a lot of bars want to hear a bunch of video game remixes.
That's messed up.
Yeah,
How dare they?
I know, right? Like, yeah, it's the bar's fault.
Exactly.
They want to listen to line dances and Journey every night, and I love Journey, but I want to switch things up. I have an appreciation.
That's different.
Yeah. So yeah, definitely trying to get more steady work into the bar scene, which sounds weird, like, oh yeah, I just want to work at bars, but I like that atmosphere. So.
Well, like even with you doing production, eventually you're going to be doing things that are like club scene.
Right.
Well, like it's like stepping stones. Like a lot of it with like live stuff. Whenever I was in like heavy metal bands and vocals, we started like at bars and then.
Wait, Mark, can you talk into the microphone, please?
Oh yeah.
Oh, it stresses me out so much.
Sorry. Like you were saying, like it's like stepping stone stuff. Like you're doing house parties and then you go into bars and then eventually bars don't want to deal with like the crowd that you bring or the bullshit that you bring, and then you start doing clubs. And that's like whenever I started doing like heavy metal stuff, I was a vocalist. We started at bars and then we were way too extreme for bars. So they were like, hey, you got to start doing shows at a place that can hold like 150 people and a mosh pit. So good luck. So it's like you're talking like progression. So so don't like one thing that you're self-deprecating, because it's like it's a progression, man. Like everyone starts at a certain point and they keep aiming higher. And I think that by the way, he's gonna be doing a show, a little like set place after this. So go see it. It's fire.
At the Jam Space, right?
Yeah,
Jam
the
Space.
in front of the dealer's room.
Yeah.
Sweet.
But like whenever it comes to like your like stepping stone stuff, man, like whenever, like I was saying, like in a span of like 2 years, I went from like no one knowing who the fuck I was to now people are like shaking my hand while I stand next to Smooth McGroove. And that scares the shit out of me because I'm like, Smooth is rad as shit. I'm just some guy that sits on my computer for way too long and has eye problems. Like, so, like, seriously, like, do you have, like, don't ever think about your progression in a negative way because that's fucking rad.
That's real.
Yeah.
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 What are your goals, Mark?
Okay, so I released an album in December called I Am Heaven. It's my first, like I've been working real hard to like go more into like electronic music because I love it and I love the scene. It's like a lot more positive than heavy metal, even though like heavy metal has like a special place in my heart, but it's way like everyone's like real happy being angry about shit and I'm not about it. I have enough stress in my life. So I started making like electronic music and I really love it and I Am Heaven did alarmingly well. And not to like brag, but we hit 60,000 streams on Spotify in 1 month. And
It's great. Yeah.
that was like huge because that's the best album release I've ever done. So I've kind of like figured out for me what I want to do that's like positive in my life. So I'm always going to be doing like video game music, but I want to start working with singers more because that was a lot of fun. And I want to start collaborating with people more because that was also like really cool. So I think like one, I'm releasing less music this year because I put out 9 albums last year and that was madness. I'm not doing that. Yeah, that fake 170 tracks last year. Never again. Never again. Yeah.
That's way a lot. If you don't have a mean on that.
So like, I want to put out less music this year, but I also want it to be like stuff that I care about, like all, because like last year was a learning curve. It was like I was shit at drums. I was shit. So I was like, I want to make an entire album about Vikings, and that's all of it's drums. It's all drums. So I was like, if I don't get good at drums now, no one's gonna buy this one, and I'm not gonna make that electronic album because that bass ain't gonna slap. So, so I did like a Viking album. I did an industrial album that was also super percussion heavy, and then I did I Am Heaven. So that was like how I like learned. And also, if you can make money off of learning, do it. Like that's like the optimum situation.
Yeah, that goes back to like programming stuff. Like Maris,
Yeah.
who worked at A Shell in the Pit, like got hired, and then he was like Gord was talking to Maris, and he was saying to Maris that like, hey, we need someone to be doing technical audio stuff around here. Is this something you might want to learn?
Yeah.
And so they were like, yeah, I would love to. And so was learning and being paid to learn
Yeah.
a super profitable skill on the job, which was awesome.
Yeah, so like if you're starting out in one thing, if your goal is to go somewhere else, like that entire situation is how that worked. So yeah, my goal for this year and for the future is to like make more personal projects, like make more electronic music that's a little bit that people can vibe with, and also I'm going to be starting to do live sets of mainly my own music. So that's going to be really cool.
Hey, Mark, I just remembered the picture you didn't want to have up here the whole time.
Oh yeah.
So Mark had a really big emo phase.
It was a goth phase.
Oh, sorry, goth,
Thank
my
you.
bad.
It was a goth phase.
Oh my gosh. Anyway, there's some really good pictures
I
out
listened
there.
to nothing but Japanese heavy metal for like 8 years. All I did was listen to Deer and Grey and scream Cradle of Filth.
Yeah.
Like that's all I did for heavy metal bands for like since I was 13.
So good.
Like 13 to 20.
Amazing.
It's a choice.
Should we do questions?
Yeah. Let's do questions. Please don't ask me about that.
There's a mic up here, so please feel free to scuttle up and speak into the mic so other people can say it.
Or just
Yeah.
yell. I'm
Or
big
or
fan of yelling.
project. Whatever floats your boat.
What up?
Hey, so
It's not on. Just click it on.
Uh-oh.
Just yell. Big fan of yelling.
Okay.
Now it is.
Okay. So,
Ours going. Yeah.
thank you.
Now that I wasted 2 minutes of time.
We're fine.
So, I was really surprised that Isabella brought up Pure Data because
Hell
I
yeah.
love it. It's awesome.
Yeah.
And I learned it really heavily in college. So I was really wondering, more of a question for her.
Yeah.
Is there room for that in the game industry? And is there a transition programming language that you use from there to somewhere else? I know of libpd and how you can integrate that with Unity, and I'm sure Unreal too.
Right.
But it'd be cool to hear what your thoughts are on that.
Absolutely. So I don't actually use Pure Data for anything anymore besides more like performance music. I actually translated the skills that Pure Data gave me were graphic coding, because everything. If you've ever looked at a Pure Data screen, it's very simple. It's just like nodes that you hook into things. It's basically visual circuitry. And so graphic coding, workflow in terms of signal flow, like literally how the signal goes through things and what processing order should be, and then how to make different systems interact with each other. So I don't actually use Pure Data for anything in my own daily workflow. I know a lot of programmers who have built patches that they then integrate with their audio workstations and use to make their sounds. But Pure Data for me was so much more of like training my skills and moving that onto other things. Like because I learned how to do graphic coding, I'm really comfortable working in Engine in Unreal because the blueprint system is all it's literally just a more colorful Pure Data. And then signal flow is extremely important when you're going to be using a microphone for anything because you don't want to burst your amps. But knowing, because I was using Pure Data, knowing that chain was it. So it's Pure Data was valuable in the sense, to me at least, that I learned all these things that I could then translate into other softwares and other disciplines. But like I still like to make weird sounds in it sometimes. Like it's pretty unbeatable when it comes to like robot vocalizations. Like that's what you use it for.
But it's also used on the music side. So there's a
Yeah.
Chicago-based composer, Joel Korlitz, who
Joel. Oh, he's so
it's so
talented.
good. Worked on Gorogoa and Tumbleseed. And so for the Tumbleseed soundtrack, there was a lot of, I don't know if it was in Max or Pure Data, but stuff that he made kind of just in a sort of generative modular way and then brought into his DAW to make that soundtrack.
Yeah, you can
And
make
it's really
it communicate with your workstation depending on how you hook it up and depending on what you have. Yeah, but it's even if you don't end up ever using Pure Data professionally, the mindset of Pure Data all the time.
Drop this one. I don't know what's happening.
Cool. What's your name, by the way?
My name is Emerald. Nice to meet everybody. First of all, thank y'all for having a panel about growth and your experiences within the music community, because the more of that information should be exposed, at least to help people who are passionate about creating. My question is twofold. First and foremost, as a creative, I am a jack of all trades and master of none. So trying to pitch for something specifically, I would like some insight on that in terms of y'all experiences with that. My second question is with sponsorships, or if any of y'all had any experience with sponsorships and how to go about getting sponsorships through different programs and products that you guys use to maybe build a relationship with those companies that you are using actively.
So, as far as does anyone
It's
else?
the other one, I think.
Yeah,
The
is it
second
the-
one. Yeah. No! Ooh, it's an SM.
I ain't about it.
Bad.
It's already broken.
Bad. It's just off, probably.
It's already broken.
Oh my gosh.
We ain't about it here. Anyway. All right. It hurt me, but I did it. Sometimes you have to. Never mind. Hey, we don't have time for this.
Continue. They are.
Anyway.
You can blow them up.
So as far as like whenever you're pitching something to a client, I mean, like a lot of times you're going to be one of like 20 or 30. Whenever I pitched for this, like there's a coma research center that uses sound to try to like focus and understand and pull people out of a coma using only sound. Whenever I pitched to them, I made a video talking to them about like what medical science means to me and how I had a medical science like possible background that I changed into audio for. So it's like finding, like the biggest thing is like finding your interest and focusing on it. Like I was saying before about how you like Alex made a video of him making sounds because he wanted to make sounds. Like focus your intent and make your visibility about your intent, and then like everything you talk about is your pitch. So your pitch isn't one thing, it's a series of interactions that you have with somebody. and the social media is the biggest way to do that because you're having interaction with everybody. Like, so everything you do is a pitch, everything you're doing is your visibility. So you're able to like build yourself around what you're wanting to do. That's my thing.
In terms of zeroing in too, I had to sit long and hard with the idea of like, do I stick with composing? Do I go all in into sound design? Do I try to do both at once? And there are a lot of people that are doing both at once. So you kind of have to decide, like, am I really going to be able to give 100% to both of these, or however many disciplines you have? And if you can, that's fantastic. There are some people that can, and they're killing it. But I knew personally I needed to focus on one. That like, and I had to kind of think long and hard of like, all right, you know, composing is great, but it's much more viable for me to make a living doing sound design than it is to be a composer. So you inevitably there is at a point you have to make decisions, and then but you can always still keep doing what you leave behind. Like just because you're not making money with it doesn't mean it can't be fulfilling and wonderful and reach tons of people at once. Like it's just a matter of kind of figuring out what's most likely going to help you make a living if you're trying to make a living with it. So.
And as far as sponsorships go,
I don't know anything about that. Would you know more?
As far as sponsorships go, the metal band that I was in was sponsored by a body wash company.
Actually, I can speak. You were asking about like sort of instrument or like having like Pioneer sponsor you or something. Right. So I was involved with like in college. I was involved with like a percussion group that was kind of like Stomp, and we were sponsored by Vic Firth. So I was actually involved with like emailing them, and that started because they like older members of that group swung by the factory at some point and they're like, hey, we want to talk to y'all, and it just was like super organic. So I think if you're really someone who can pound the pavement in that way and really reach out and just kind of pitch yourselves and maybe like inflate like how big you are or whatever, you know, like you can get to the right person and like maybe they have like $1,000 they can throw you a year, you know, because in the scheme of things for like big companies, like that's not that much.
Yeah.
And if you're giving them exposure that's worth that in communities that they don't have access to, that could be really cool.
My sponsorship was them sending an obnoxious amount of product to me that I had to go through for like 6 years.
So you just throw it out at the shows?
No,
Soap.
They had their like label on like the flyers. They had like their label on all the flyers that we did, and I was like, okay.
Yeah, we got 7 minutes and 2 questions.
Yeah, let's go. No, don't touch it. Okay.
Just checking.
It has no friends.
So I've done a lot of my audio work in television and radio, and a large majority of them use Avid. You're 100% spot on. They're trash. Take that to heart, everybody. But I guess my question is, I've not really loved any of like I mean, I like working with audio, like mixing it up and working with it, but I don't really like being in, I guess, the media industry. I guess was wondering if you thought maybe it'd be easier to trans over to something more that I enjoy more, like video games and anything like that.
I have experience. Most of what I'm doing currently, as well, in addition to video games, is also television and radio. And I think that you run the risk of disappointing yourself if you romanticize video games too much. Like, it's an industry just like anything else. Like, I have really good days when I'm working on games. I have really bad days when I'm working on games. It's sort of, you have to understand, it's a young industry as well. It's been around for 20, 30 years at this point, and like that's nothing. So people are still trying to figure out how it works. So a lot of the pluses of games is that it's really fresh and it's new, and lots of really interesting people are doing cool stuff with it, but it also really doesn't kind of know itself like television or radio does, that's been around for almost 100 years, both at this point, that those industries have had a time to sort of calcify and like be what they are now, and there are goods and there are bads. But video games is really exciting and fun, and like if you like doing it, you're gonna have a lot more fun doing it, but you also have to understand that like it's gonna become a job just like anything else. Yeah. So it's, you know, sort of know your own limits. Go for it by all means, but understand that it's not like a paradise of like everyone having a great time and just play. Like it can be hell sometimes. Yes. So it's just like sort of, you know, talk to people, like find like people like us and people who have worked in the industry, just like get an ear at some point, like ping someone on Twitter, see what people are up to. And that will give you a read into sort of what that shift is like. Thoughts? Yes?
That was great.
Okay.
Hi. So you've mentioned the importance of teaching yourself and educating yourself using resources on the internet when developing your skill set. But then Josie also mentioned that you're about to go back to school. So I was wondering how you weigh the advantages and disadvantages of doing that, and how you make that call, and what the best factors are when considering that.
That was a really rough time. I think I'd consider going to school. So I'm 28, and I considered going to school for like 2-3 years. And basically, I had a lot of conversations with my friend Mark Bennis, who's a composer also in New York, who's really great, about like what do I think like the benefits could be versus like the cost of like kind of like taking time off to do that. Like I feel like I've been making some good momentum with my stuff, and could I just keep doing it? And the answer is like maybe. But he was encouraging me to think about like, what about 5 years from now, and like what about 10 years from now? Like, would I be gaining skills in my program that would be helping me in the long term? And so, like when weighing those things, like me not coming from like a theory music background, or like from like an orchestral background, like I felt like I could really patch up a lot of the things that I was missing by being in an academic environment like that. Or things like learning audio mastering, or like I'm taking game audio and like going to be learning like Unity more officially next semester. Is everything okay?
Everything is fine.
Anyway, so I think the best way to sort of process like a big decision like that is A, talk to a lot of people who know you. B, talk to a lot of people in the industry who have like experience like way ahead of where you are and are on the same level as where you are. And C, sometimes you just need to like take a break and like go to like the neighboring city for like 2 weeks and just like get away from like your environment so you can like process things a little more holistically. But yeah, that's all I can say.
I will say with like a degree, in terms of like feeling whether or not you need a degree to be relevant in this industry, the answer is no.
Definitely not.
Like some of the most successful audio people that I know were just like, yeah, I fell into it 10 years ago and I just never left. Like it's truly amazing how people can just sit in it and grow incredibly. But if it's a case by case basis. Like Josie's going back to school. I would never go back to school.
I dropped out.
They don't have a DJ school.
Yeah, they might in like 5 years. Yeah.
There is one.
What, Scratch Tech? Is that what they call it?
It's the one that I forget what it's called, but Martin Garrix went to it. It's actually a DJ school.
Really?
Yeah. Also, I dropped out of college.
Yeah, and it's like you just got to figure out what works for you. There's money involved, there's jobs involved, there's timing involved, there's family involved. Like you can't ever predict anything. You can think to a certain extent, but like do what feels right and what feels right for your wallet and your goals. And like school's expensive. Like that's an unfortunate part of this country, is that school's really expensive. But there's I would say the only right answer is what you end up deciding.
Yeah.
But Josie has good thoughts on that. I hated college.
Yeah.
I dropped out because they weren't teaching me anything I didn't know, so I got really arrogant and said, fuck it.
We have 1 minute. One last question.
We can go a little bit over, it's fine.
Force them to kick us out so we can keep going.
Yeah, go nuts.
So you guys talk a lot about working in software, doing sound design, all that jazz. Do you ever work with live performers for recording? And if you do, can you talk about that for a little bit?
So my experience is like working with individual performers for layering processes for tracks. So I'll record everything with a VST. I'll just do all the MIDI and stuff like that. I'll send over the sheet music, and I'll have like one performer do multiple takes, and then I'll layer that in with the VST. That's like virtual instruments, if anyone cares. So like you just layer that and you mix that together, and that's how a lot of my stuff gets done. And that's my experience. But you all probably have different ones.
Sorry, just to make sure I understand. So you're saying you send the sheet music to a performer, and they send you, I guess, electronic copy that.
They have a recording of them performing it, and then I mix it into the virtual instrument group. So, cool. Yeah.
So no,
I still regularly work with voice actors, often for like advertisement spots or something, or even for games to record characters. But then even in my own workflow, I use my voice all the time. Like not even making words, like just like squishing around sounds. Like for Marvel in the VR game, if you play Venom, that's an orange in my mouth. Like most of that sound was me like getting up on getting very friendly with a microphone. But like, don't write out the really like you can get some really organic stuff out of just like breathing and sort of making strange sounds and like just squishing stuff around and like. You can get better analog texture sometimes than you can out of a synth. It's just a fact of sound. But it's truly the Wild West in terms of like building sounds with voice. And I think it's really cool, and there needs to be more of it. So thanks for asking.
If you're asking specifically about instruments, like the way that it works in like big games that have a lot of budget to hire independent musicians, like Kristen Nagus, who's like a big woodwind person. Basically, you would make sheet music for their part and send it to them. A lot of them have in-home rigs, and they'll send you just the full file back. I don't do that because I'm still pretty small and I don't have big budget projects like that. But I could, and whatever, I'll record myself. Yeah.
I would like I said, like I send people just like one like their part, and like we just mix it all in after they record it, and just like one instrumentalist for the group will add in a lot of like realism because it actually is a real player, like just mixed a little bit above the rest of the group that you're performing with, virtual instrument wise.
I will say before we wrap things up, like I think everyone here on this panel is super available on Twitter, and if you want to reach out to us or come talk to us after this panel, we're all very down to talk and chat more about this stuff. So
I'm going to Korean barbecue, so I'm not available. Like, y'all don't bother me with that.
Ping us all for our handles if you want to follow, because always more people like. Audio is the most inclusive industry ever. More people is always a good thing. Anyone who tells you like, no, like there are too many, like no, fuck that. Like join. Like it's exactly. It truly like the more people you have making sound, the better it's gonna be. So.
But yeah, if you have questions for us, also real quick about rates. We just had a big like thread thanks to Priscilla Snow about rates, and that was very important. Like. That's something you can look at on Twitter, but just understand and like really focus on like what you need to be able to survive. Like if you try to do this stuff full time.
It was like, hashtag what's music worth if you want to look up those conversations. They were cool.
You're worth way more than you think you are. Like
the bare minimum, the literal bare minimum, if you're a composer, if you're getting paid professionally to do this shit, it is $300 a minute. If you charge less than that, I will be angry at you. Like legitimately, that's the lowest you should be getting paid. Like full stop. And if you're like in a professional space. But anyway, Twitter, we should all, like if you are on Twitter, please ask us questions. And we're all super open. Did anyone else have any other thoughts?
No?
Thanks for coming. This was fun.
Thank you all so much.